Alright. Welcome everyone. Some people are still joining. Fine to see. Welcome to this session, Kickstarting for Good as a high impact career path. Beforehand, if you have any questions during this talk, submit them to the swap card app. You can also vote on questions if you see a really interesting one. You can find it under the live discussion at this session. And if you have even more questions, because we probably have time for a few questions at the end, but not all, there are still slots free in the office hour, so we'll walk through that right after this talk. So if you have more questions or you want to have a more in-depth conversation, please join for office hours. I can introduce our speaker, Sebastian Joy. He is a serial social entrepreneur working to transform the global food system. Over the last 2 decades, he has helped launch dozens of non-profits, coalitions, and social enterprises. Social enterprise event series and campaigns around the world. Sebastian is the founding president of Provac International, and he has also launched Kickstarting for Good. He and his organizations have received multiple international awards, including the Momentum for Change Award from the United Nations. And he invented an award-winning toothpaste. Please welcome our speaker, Sebastian.
If you've learned a lot about leadership and making a movement, then let's watch a movement happen start to finish in under 3 minutes and dissect some lessons. First, of course, a leader needs the guts to stand alone and look ridiculous. But what he's doing is so simple, it's almost instructional. This is key. You must be easy to follow. Now here comes the first follower with a crucial role. He publicly shows everyone else how to follow. Notice how the leader embraces him as an equal. So it's not about the leader anymore, it's about them, plural. Notice how he's calling to his friends to join in. So it takes guts to be the first follower. You stand out, you brave ridicule yourself. Being a first follower is an underappreciated form of leadership. The first follower transforms a lone nut into a leader. If the leader is the flint, the first follower is the spark that really makes the fire. Now here's the second follower. This is a turning point. It's proof the first has done well. Now it's not a lone nut, and it's not 2 nuts. 3 is a crowd, and a crowd is news. A movement must be public. Make sure outsiders see more than just the leader. Everyone needs to see the followers, because new followers emulate followers, not the leader. Now here come 2 more people, then 3 more immediately. Now we've got momentum. This is the tipping point, and now we have a movement. As more people jump in, it's no longer risky. If they were on the fence before, there's no reason not to join in now. They won't stand out, they won't be ridiculed, and they will be part of the in crowd if they hurry. And over the next minute, you'll see the rest who prefer to stay part of the crowd, because eventually they'd be ridiculed for not joining. And ladies and gentlemen, that is how a movement is made. So let's recap what we've learned. If you are a version of the shirtless dancing guy, all alone, remember the importance of nurturing your first few followers as equals, making everything clearly about the movement, not you. Be public, be easy to follow. But the biggest lesson here, did you catch it? Leadership is overglorified. Yes, it started with the shirtless guy, and he'll get all the credit, but you saw what really happened. It was the first follower that transformed a lone nut into a leader. There's no movement without the first follower. See, we're told that we all need to be leaders, but that would be really ineffective. The best way to make a movement, if you really care, is to courageously follow and show others how to follow. When you find a lone nut doing something great, have the guts to be the first person to stand up and join in.
Hello everybody. How many of you would consider themselves to be part of the EA movement? Well, to be expected at an EAG. Good. And how many of you have heard of the concept of earning to give? Quite a lot. Are there any people who actually practice earning to give in the room here? you. Yeah, that's good. What's actually quite interesting about those two concepts, who have become quite popular over the last decade, is that the basic idea has been around for much, much longer. Like, for example, we look at effective altruism, the basic idea, you can go back to the first utilitarians, or also for earning to give. People have been making money and donating it way before the term was coined. However, in both instances, actually naming something and developing more of a framework or a methodology or a community has really added a lot of value. Like, for example, with effective altruism, we all know the framework of, that we have to focus or should focus on causes that are important, reflected, and tractable. I think that has not been as explicit before. Or for example, like with earning to give, it's really about, okay, make as much money as you can, ethically and legally, you need to add these days. And then obviously also donate very effectively. But if you basically do that, you're doing earning to give, and there are many ways to do this. And now there are even whole communities, whether it's giving what we can or founders pledge, where people come together to have this shared identity that's what they do. Now, by coining that term and providing more of a framework and a community, lots of value has been added. And I'm actually here today to suggest that there should be an additional framework and methodology and way of thinking, of acting, of making good in the world, which we've come to name Kickstarting for Good. So what exactly is it? So it's a way of looking at the world, or a method, also a career path, as it has been announced, where you maximize the overall good that you do in the world by launching many high-impact initiatives. So unlike earning to give, where you financially support them, you basically make them happen in the first place. So that's also how the two work well together. Now there are actually 4 very simple steps to Kickstart for Good, and they are launch, secure, leave, and repeat. And so basically launch means you start something, and I'm saying something because it can be a broad variety, or we'll come to that in a minute, something that has, has a positive impact in the world. Secure means you make sure that it survives and thrives, so it's not a one-time off and something that, doesn't continue to exist. Third, is also very important, you withdraw yourself quite quickly so that you're not involved on the long run. And then you basically look for a new opportunity. And then repeat the whole process. Sounds fairly simple. Obviously, as we have seen with EA and earning to give, it's not like that this is something that has never been done in the world before. There are obviously lots of people, whether it's within our movement or without our movement, who have traditionally started lots of different, non-profits or initiatives, and might not be that much involved anymore. Like Will McAskill started 80,000 Hours, but he's not much involved anymore. And many others, Gandhi started lots of things. And in most cases, actually, people usually refer to people like that as serial social entrepreneurs. That they are entrepreneurs, they start something, build something up. And so you might say, well, okay, don't we already have the idea of serial social entrepreneur that actually covers what I just described? But I'm actually arguing that Kickstarting for Good is a bit broader than just serial social entrepreneurship. And I'm going to explain it by using myself as an example, because I'm very familiar with myself. So I usually can refer to that a lot. So, for example, usually when people introduce me, also what Ruben has said, I'm the founding president of Progress International. It's a global food awareness organization. I think we have over 200 staff in 12 countries, including China. So we're the first NGO that was actually officially registered or approved by the Chinese government. International EA organization in that regard, and I think have a budget of 15 billion or something like that. So we have so that's usually what I'm known for, because it's kind of like the most visible entity that I help create. So, and that's obviously the case also with with other entrepreneurs. You usually know what has become most big. Like if you think of Steve Jobs, you think of Apple, because that's the biggest thing he has created. And same with me. However, if you actually look at it, if you actually create something, there's always 2 dimensions. How much impact does is being created by what you have created, and how much effort have you put into that. And yes, I would probably say, ProVeg as a whole organization, also the way it's probably going to continue to exist, probably has a lot of impact in the world, but it also required an awful lot of my time. So, officially we launched in 2017. I've probably spent over 10,000 hours since then, and even before that, there was another organization. So that we basically, pivoted. So probably if you add it all up, close to 20,000 hours that actually went into me founding or co-founding this one organization. However, there's also quite a number of things that I've launched that people might not know. And first of all, I have a question. Did anybody go to the neurodiversity meetup earlier today? Oh yeah, there are a few? Okay. Yes, because, and apparently it was quite well attended. There were only 28 seats left. So I think, I don't know how many people got there, probably a couple dozen or so?
I think 22, yeah.
Okay. But probably none of those people actually realized why that meeting actually exists. And the reason is, when I went to EAG London last year, I looked at the types of meetups and says, okay, I'm straight, I can't go to LGBTQ, I'm not Catholic. But there were not really many meetups for me. I said, oh, but I got ADHD, why don't they have any neurodiversity meetups? So I wrote to the organizers, and they said, well, if you want to organize a meetup, be our guest. So I organized the first neurodiversity meetup at the EAG London last year, and later, pretty much a year ago, I got this email from the organizers. I'm going to read it out. So, hi Sebastian, thank you so much for your suggestion and for suggesting and running the neurodiversity meetup at EAG London. I thought you might be pleased to know we are now going to run it at some of our future EAGs and EAGx's. So your suggestion was very much appreciated and noticed by the team. So obviously, as we've seen, I had nothing to do with the meetup this year. I didn't even know whether it's happening or not, but I'm very happy to see that it's still taking place at various EAGs. So if you look at our two-dimensional map, obviously I'm not going to say that, having these regular neurodiversity meetup is, the most impactful thing that can happen in the world. So obviously on the impact scale, I would put it way more on the left side of things. But then if you actually consider how much time was needed from my end to actually launch it, it was significantly less than 10 hours. I mean, it was basically, I thought of the idea, I wrote them, they said, hey, you want to do it? I mean, I took a few hours to prepare it, but then once it was done, it was done. So it's actually interesting to see, because you could think about, okay, if you look at the effort to time ratio. And then I also thought about some of the other ideas that I've launched over the years. And I think Ruben kindly mentioned a few years ago, I invented a vitamin B12 toothpaste. Also has a bit to do with my ADHD, because I tend to forget to take any supplements. And because I'm vegan, I want to supplement with B12. So I thought, oh my God, if there's a way I could not forget it, would that not be nice? So I came up with the idea of a B12 toothpaste. We found some companies to produce. We did some peer-reviewed studies, so it all works out. But anyway, again, I'm not saying that, and it's actually being sold in many countries, has been sold several million times, and lots of vegans are benefiting from it. Again, so I would say it's probably not the most world-changing intervention there is, but it still has a positive impact on the world. And at the end of the day, okay, it took me, maybe, I don't know, less than 100 hours. I didn't count exactly like that. And another example, has anybody heard of the EVA Summit? I don't know, yeah, okay, there are a few people. So that's actually something that we came up with a couple of years ago, because we perceived that there was a gap in the movement. And again, we just found a few people and initiated it. I did a bit of a math, probably less than 200 hours, but I think it's actually growing quite well. That it has over 1 million revenues. They're actually going to organize 4 events next year, so it's really becoming quite a big event series in Asia, in Latin America, even Africa. So it's kind of like an EAG for the plant-based vegan animal movement. So it has actually quite grown substantially. So I would actually put it somewhere in the middle in terms of overall impact. But again, their initial time investment for me wasn't very high. So if we actually now look not in terms of what has the biggest impact, which I would probably still put forward given these 4 examples, but if we actually look at the ratio between the effort and the impact, then where we want to be is we want to be in the green area. Obviously, you don't want to do something, put lots of effort into something that has little impact. Why would you want to do that? And that's the ideal scenarios. With no time, you cure malaria. If you could do that with 5 hours of your time, that would be very impressive, but obviously that's fairly hard to do. But as a rule of thumb, this is where you want to be. So one realization was actually, okay, it's not necessarily about maximizing the overall impact you do with an initiative, but the impact per time. So what I can say, you want to maximize your time effectiveness as an entrepreneur or somebody who's doing Kickstarting for good. So that's one of the first principle, which basically means if there's an intervention that you would normally place here, you can either try to make it more impactful, or you can try to do it with less effort. And in both cases, you're improving your time effectiveness in equal measures. And often this seems to be more neglected. So how do you actually do that? How do you get to a point where you can start things that do good in the world without having to invest too much time? So first of all, it starts at the beginning. So you basically have to factor in your own obsolescence right from the start. And that basically means, in order to do so, you need to know what is actually needed for something to thrive and survive for a long time, something that you start. So first of all, you need an idea. The idea needs to be good. You need the right people. You usually need some kind of money, seed money, or money that comes in. And especially in the beginning, you use some proof of concept. And ideally, you're not involved in too many. You're not involved in having to put in too many of these pieces, because all of those pieces take a significant amount of time. But if you can identify opportunities where lots of these pieces are in place, you can become much more time efficient in that regard. So let me give you a few examples. So the next principle would be to look for opportunities. So with regards to the examples that I mentioned, in those 4 areas, for the toothpaste, for example, my main contribution was the initial idea. Hey, why don't we put actually vitamin B12 in toothpaste? Everybody thought that's pretty crazy. That's apparently why it hasn't been done before. But then we actually reached out to toothpaste companies, and because it was obviously a product that can be sold, the money was not much of an issue. And then they also did some, developed a prototype and did some studies. So it was actually very cost effective, because all I had to do was basically contribute the idea. Now, there are also areas where I contributed in other areas. For example, with the AVA Summit, the general idea of having a conference, that other people have had that. So that was not necessarily my contribution. Maybe a bit a combination of how EA and how to combine the two. But I guess that is not something I would say is unique. Also, in terms of money, there actually have been funders already interested in supporting such an event, and there obviously have been other conferences around, so that there was not so much of a proof of concept needed. But what actually was needed is to bring the founding team together, so somebody who can actually organize a conference, somebody who connects them with the funders, and the founding team. And this apparently has been quite complicated. I mean, I had one funder actually tell me, oh, people have been talking about doing such a conference for years. And to which I responded, yeah, but talking about it doesn't make it happen. And that's basically what we did. So here it was necessarily put the people together. So sometimes that's the case, we just have to put the right people. With the neurodiversity meetup that we mentioned, I think it was probably primarily just a proof of concept. The organizers from EAG wanted to see, okay, if you organize such a meetup, do actually enough people come? Because if only 3 people show up, then it's not much of a meetup. But apparently there have been, the first one we organized in London last year, I think we had around 30 people, which they thought was a decent size enough to keep going. So sometimes it's the proof of concept that's needed, and in that case it was fairly simple to do. And sometimes it's only like the piece of money that needed. So one idea we launched earlier this year, it's called Reporters for Animals International. It's a support network for animal investigators. And here, like the people were already there, they had the general idea, they actually already had already a small community, but they were lacking the funding to actually really create an organization that can sustain itself on the long run. So basically in this case, only this piece was needed. So this is important to know, okay, so sometimes, so it's important to look for opportunities where maybe only one of these pieces is missing, because then you don't have to put in so much effort. So how do you do that? And that actually works by the next principle, which is building up expertise. So in these of those areas, it's important to build up expertise. So for example, with ideas, how do you identify, collect, and vet impactful ideas? There are thousands of ideas out there. I have 30 ideas a day, but usually they're very, very bad. So I have to find mechanisms to, okay, how do I find once in a while the hidden gem that I don't often realize myself. But how you ask others, or with people, it's about identifying, vetting, and motivating and connecting people who can actually build something. Just sometimes it's just putting the right people together. How do you raise the necessary funds? And how do you create a minimum viable product to actually develop a product? So in all of those areas, it's good to build up a certain amount of expertise that you can put the various pieces together, and you don't realize, oh my God, everything is falling apart. I mean, you might know some people who always have a new idea, and then they work on them for 6 months, and then 6 months later and nothing actually ever materializes. That's probably because one of those components is faulty. So maybe they don't get the funding, maybe they don't have the right people, maybe the idea itself was not good, whatever it was. But you really have to have all the pieces together. Now, how does it look like in your career? How are actually the ways where you can do Kickstarting for good? And there are actually a number of options, so it's not just a one-size-fits-all. So one way to do Kickstarting for good is you can be an organizational leader or an entrepreneur. So most of my time, most of the last 5 to 7 years, I've been quite busy running ProVeg, the organization. But at the same time, I always carved out a little bit to basically seize on these opportunities, for example, like the EVA Summit 2 years ago, to actually start it. Because given the position that I had, it was fairly, I had the network to the funders, I knew former staffers who were interested in organizing such an event. So that actually can be an interesting position if you're within an organization that gives you the ability, within the same sector or industry or cause area to create new initiatives. And then that can either be within that organization, or that can be something that spins off. Obviously, if you're a major funder or you work for a foundation, that also works quite well. As the saying goes, money talks, people listen. If a funder has usually an idea, there are people who want to make it happen. So that's obviously also a good way to create new initiatives. Now you can obviously also go full time into serial social entrepreneurship or Kickstarting for good, and you can either do that by becoming a consecutive social entrepreneur, which basically means you focus maybe 1 or 2 years at a time on creating something, and then you move on to the next. Or you do it more in parallel. If you look at Elon Musk, he's running 3 companies, or is trying to run 3 companies in parallel. I would not always recommend it, but for some people that can actually work. And obviously it can also be a bit of a combination that maybe you transition out of one position while starting something new. But there is quite a variety of ways you can do it. Now, in order to do this, we also need to build networks. So on the one hand, you want to, also in each of those areas, or for these different pieces, you want to build up networks to be more impactful. So on the one hand, you want to develop a pipeline of ideas. You want to develop a network of potential founders, also a network of major funders who are interested in supporting that, and also a network of facilitators, so basically people who put the pieces together in terms of building a website, a minimal viable product, and that. And then last but not least, what obviously is very impactful on top of it all, if you could even inspire more people to do Kickstarting for good. So to use the example coming full circle with Earning to Give, if you can make $1 million and donate most of it every year, that's obviously very impressive as Earning to Give. but it's even more impressive if you can actually inspire other people to also make $1 million and donate them. So by multiplying yourself, you get even more impact. And the same is obviously true for Kickstarting for Good. It's good to do it yourself, but if you can actually inspire others or teach others to also do Kickstarter for Good, that's even much better. So basically, the hope is, me standing here as the lone nut introducing that concept, the question would be, can we actually create more of a movement and have more people join us in that endeavor? Thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much. We kind of all used up all the time, and I don't want to press people into staying too long. But if you have questions, there's always hours. So I've seen quite some of you have already signed up for it. If you have a question and you want to ask it, there's also still spots in the office hour. So you can join us in like a few minutes in Neon, which is like on the other side in Polar area. And I hope you had a great talk. I at least learned a lot.